Welcome to True Crime Sketches Files. In today's episode, we journey into a harrowing tale of deception and murder that unfolded in the seemingly peaceful town of Fayetteville, Arkansas. It was April 2015, when trust was shattered and a life ended far too soon. The life of Johnny Ray, a man whose success masked the darkness creeping ever closer. Johnny Ray Baxter, a 45-year-old real estate agent, was well known around town. His smile, radiant and warm, was the kind that made people feel instantly at ease. Working for Ozark Realty, he had built a reputation not only as a capable businessman, but as someone you'd want to have a beer with after a long day. His clients adored him, his colleagues respected him, and for over 2 decades, Johnny had been the man you called when you wanted to buy a house in Fayetteville. But his life wasn't just about deals and contracts. Outside of work, Johnny Ray loved the freedom of the open water. His sailboat, whimsically named Dreamcatcher, was his weekend refuge, drifting across Beaver Lake's calm waters. Friends at the marina knew him as the guy who always had a joke, always had a smile, and never turned down a chance to help. Life, by all accounts, seemed pretty perfect for Johnny Ray. Johnny was married to Darling Baxter. On the surface, they appeared the picture of happiness. Darling was his second wife, and they lived together with her daughter from her previous marriage, Lily Adams. Lily, an 18-year-old studying psychology at the University of Arkansas, got along well with Johnny Ray, or so it appeared to the outside world. Yet, as with many stories, what lay beneath the surface was a different tale entirely. In the days leading up to his death, Johnny was working hard, closing a big deal on a commercial property downtown. It was important, one of those career-defining moments. But that wasn't all on his mind. He was planning a surprise anniversary trip for Darling. A cabin in the Ozark Mountains, a concert in Little Rock, and a carefully selected necklace from Sissy's log cabin, a romantic gesture to rekindle their love. April 10, 2015. 2 days before everything unraveled, Johnny Ray was seen at his usual haunt, Arsagas, the local coffee shop. Caramel latte in hand, smiling as he told the baristas about the weekend ahead. He was excited, full of life. But hidden beneath the surface of his upbeat demeanor, cracks were forming. Darling had been acting differently. She seemed stressed, distracted. She suspected Johnny Ray wasn't being entirely truthful about his late-night meetings. And Lily, something was off with her too. On the morning of April 12, 2015, the nightmare began. At around 7:30 a.m., Johnny Ray's body was discovered by his neighbor, Michael Everly. Michael, a 52-year-old retired schoolteacher, had lived next door for years. Darling had called him, panicked because she hadn't heard from Johnny since the night before. She was out of town visiting her sister and begged Michael to check on him. Michael knocked on the door, no answer. But Johnny Ray's car was in the driveway. Michael tried the door, and to his surprise it was unlocked. Stepping inside, an unsettling silence engulfed him. Something wasn't right. He called out but heard nothing in return. As he walked through the living room, his eyes took in the overturned chairs, the shattered glass. A struggle had happened here. His heart pounded as he made his way toward the bedroom. The door creaked open, revealing a scene out of a nightmare. Johnny Ray lay motionless in a pool of blood, a hammer discarded near his lifeless body. The room told the story of a brutal, desperate fight for survival. Blood spattered the walls, furniture overturned, chaos everywhere. Michael's breath caught in his throat as he backed out of the room, shaking, fumbling for his phone to dial 911. The horror of what he had seen would haunt him for the rest of his life. The news spread like wildfire. Police cars lined Maple Street, and neighbors, wide-eyed with shock, whispered in disbelief. Johnny Ray, a man so full of life, had met such a violent end. Local news stations rushed to cover the story. By midday, it was the top headline. How could this happen? Who could do this? And why? Michael, in a daze, later told reporters that Johnny Ray was a good man, a man who didn't deserve such a grisly fate. But as the investigation unfolded, the picture grew darker. Secrets hidden behind the Baxter family's polished exterior began to surface. Tensions simmered beneath the Baxter roof, tensions no one had truly seen. The question remained, was it betrayal, or something more sinister, that led to Johnny Ray's untimely death? The discovery of Johnny Ray Baxter's body was only the beginning. What followed was a tangled web of lies, jealousy, and a truth so shocking that even those closest to him could never have imagined the depths of it. In Fayetteville, Arkansas, April 2015, would forever be remembered not just as the month Johnny Ray Baxter was brutally taken, but as the moment trust was shattered and secrets long buried came to light. The arrival of police at the Baxter home marked the beginning of an intense and high-stakes investigation. Michael Everly's frantic 911 call had set everything into motion. and by the morning of April 12, 2015, the once quiet neighborhood was a crime scene. Officers swiftly secured the house, blocking off access and ensuring that no one, friend, neighbor, or curious onlooker, got too close. Detective Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and her partner, Detective James Carter, were on the scene soon after. Mitchell-Kinsey, sharp-eyed and relentless in her pursuit of truth, had a reputation for noticing the smallest of details. Beside her, Carter, seasoned and deliberate, approached every case with a methodical calmness. Together they were a formidable team, though even they hadn't seen many scenes quite as gruesome as the one awaiting them. Walking through the house, the detectives could immediately sense the chaos that had erupted here. Overturned chairs in the living room, shattered glass across the floor. It was clear that whatever had unfolded was no quiet struggle. The kitchen was in disarray, dishes strewn about as if an argument had escalated into violence. But the true horror awaited them in the master bedroom. Johnny Ray Baxter lay lifeless on the floor, his body encircled by a dark pool of blood. The hammer, bloody and discarded, was left near his body, as if to underline the brutality of the attack. Blood spattered the walls and furniture, painting a violent picture of his final moments. Detective Mitchell-Kinsey grimly noted the hammer as the murder weapon, making sure it was carefully bagged and sent to the lab for analysis. The forensics team moved through the house like ghosts, quietly gathering evidence. Gloves on, they meticulously collected blood samples, fingerprints, and any possible clue that could lead them closer to the truth. The scene, while disturbing, was a treasure trove of information. If they could only piece it together. Outside, the curious and the fearful gathered. Neighbors whispered among themselves, eyes wide with disbelief. The local media, quick to sense the gravity of the situation, arrived soon after. Cameras from stations like KFSM and KNA hovered at the scene, eager for any scrap of information. Reporters interviewed neighbors who described Johnny Ray as a friendly, well-liked man, the kind who didn't seem to have any enemies. The pressure to solve the case mounted with each passing hour. The detectives turned to Michael Everly, hoping his account of the morning might offer some insight. Still visibly shaken from his discovery, Everly recounted the events in halting detail. The unlocked door, the mess inside, and the chilling silence that had met him when he called out for Johnny Ray. His testimony helped the detectives reconstruct what little they could of that fateful night. But there were still so many unanswered questions. Who could harbor such rage against Johnny Ray? What reason could there possibly be for such an unforgiving act? The first person under scrutiny was predictably Darling Baxter. At 34, Darling was a driven woman, known for her intelligence and precision as an accountant at Razorback Accounting. But beneath that composed exterior was a woman who had weathered storms most couldn't imagine. She had become a mother at 16 and worked as a stripper to provide for her daughter, Lily. Life had been a fight, but Darling had fought her way to success. Recently, however, Darling had started to suspect things weren't right. Lily, now 18 and navigating her first year at university, had changed, her behavior distant, her moods erratic. Johnny Ray's late-night work meetings didn't help. Friends and neighbors had noticed the tension seeping into the Baxter household, and whispers of arguments had begun to circulate in the weeks before Johnny Ray's murder. On April 13, 2015, detectives Mitchell-Kinsey and Carter brought Darling in for questioning. She arrived calm, but her eyes betrayed a deep sadness and fatigue. Though visibly distressed, Darling stuck to her alibi. She had been out of town, visiting her sister Nancy in Little Rock. To back up her story, she handed over photos, texts, even receipts, anything that might prove her innocence. But the detectives, seasoned as they were, still had their doubts. During the interrogation, Darling spoke of her marriage with a surprising frankness. She admitted that the couple had been arguing more frequently, mainly over Johnny Ray's work schedule and how often he was away. Still, she insisted she loved her husband and had no reason to harm him, despite their disagreements. She wearily denied any involvement in his death, claiming she was as shocked and heartbroken as anyone. The detectives probed deeper. Where had she been the night of April 11th, the night before Johnny Ray's body was found? Darling explained that she had left for Little Rock that afternoon and stayed with her sister Nancy until the morning of April 12th. When contacted, Nancy corroborated Darling's story, confirming that her sister had indeed spent the night with her. Yet, despite her seemingly airtight alibi, the detectives couldn't shake a lingering feeling. Darling had written about her suspicions and frustrations in a personal diary they found during a search of her belongings. The entries painted a vivid picture of a woman under immense strain, grappling with the changes in her daughter and the growing distance from her husband. Though nothing directly tied Darling to the murder, she remained at the top of their list. Something in her demeanor, Her tight-lipped responses, the flicker of tension when speaking about Johnny Ray, kept her squarely in their sights. The detectives, relentless in their pursuit of the truth, dug deeper into Darling Baxter's past, interviewing friends, family, and colleagues. They searched for any trace of motive, any hidden clue that might connect her to Johnny Ray's death. But despite the growing pressure on Darling, she stood her ground, insisting on her innocence. Each question answered only seemed to birth more questions, and the mystery of Johnny Ray's murder deepened. Yet, Darling wasn't the only person under the microscope. The second suspect the detectives turned their attention to was Johnny Ray's stepdaughter, Lily Adams. Lily, an 18-year-old freshman at the University of Arkansas, was well known among her peers for her vivacious and ambitious personality. Friends described her as bright and curious, a student who approached life with eagerness, but behind that lively exterior lay a web of secrets. During the investigation, a startling truth emerged. Lily and her stepfather, Johnny Ray, had been involved in a clandestine affair. This revelation hit like a bombshell. The relationship had started about 6 months earlier, and the weight of it had been crushing Lily from the inside. Guilt gnawed at her, especially as she watched her mother, Darling, unravel under the strain. Lily was torn between the man she had grown close to and the family she feared she was destroying. On April 14, 2015, detectives Mitchell, Kinsey, and Carter brought Lily in for questioning. Her demeanor was markedly different from her mother's. Where Darling had been composed, Lily was visibly nervous, though cooperative. She confessed to the affair, explaining that it began during a vulnerable time in her life. Johnny Ray had offered her comfort, understanding, something she desperately needed. But, she swore, she had never wanted to hurt anyone. As the interrogation went on, Lily revealed she had confided in a close friend about the affair and the overwhelming guilt that came with it. This friend, whose identity was kept confidential, corroborated Lily's story. When asked about the last time she saw Johnny Ray, Lily hesitated, then admitted they had argued the night before his death. The affair was unraveling their family, and the confrontation had left her emotionally wrecked. Still, Lily provided an alibi for the night of the murder. She had been at a friend's house studying for a midterm exam, and that friend confirmed it. Despite the alibi, however, the detectives couldn't shake their suspicions. The emotional turmoil Lily was going through, combined with the intensity of the affair, left a shadow of doubt. It seemed too neat, too clean. A search of Lily's dorm room yielded no physical evidence connecting her to the crime. But the detectives found something just as telling: several letters exchanged between Lily and Johnny Ray. These notes were filled with confessions of affection, of longing, and of the struggles both were experiencing. It painted a picture of two people caught in a dangerous and volatile situation. Though the affair alone wasn't enough to convict Lily, the detectives couldn't ignore the emotional tension it had created. The investigation into her continued, with detectives interviewing her friends, classmates, and anyone who might have known more than they let on. But with no direct evidence tying her to the crime, Lily was left under a cloud of suspicion, struggling with her own guilt and the pressure mounting from all sides. Then, on April 17, 2015, just 5 days after Johnny Ray's murder, the case took an unexpected turn. It was early in the morning, the air crisp and biting, when a jogger made a curious discovery near Beaver Lake Park. Beneath a bench, partially buried under a thin layer of leaves, was a plastic bag. It didn't belong there, and something about it made the jogger pause. When he opened it, he found what no one expected: a blood-stained shirt and a pair of gloves. He immediately called the police. Patrol officers Karen Lewis and Tom Martinez were the first to arrive on the scene, securing the area with precision. Soon after, detectives Mitchell, Kinsey, and Carter were on site, assessing the situation. The items were quickly bagged and taken back to the Fayetteville Police Department for forensic analysis. Cautiously optimistic, the detectives hoped that this new evidence might finally break the case wide open. The results came in fast. The blood on the shirt was a match for Johnny Ray Baxter's DNA. More interestingly, the gloves bore fingerprints that didn't belong to Johnny Ray. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. With renewed focus, the detectives revisited their list of suspects and scrutinized their alibis. They also reviewed surveillance footage from the park and surrounding areas, hoping the evidence trail might lead them closer to the truth. It was during this review that something shocking was uncovered. A figure matching Lily Adams' description was captured on camera, entering the park late on the night of the murder. The discovery sent a shockwave through the investigation. Why was Lily near Beaver Lake that night? What was she doing there? As the pieces of the puzzle started falling into place, the detectives knew they were closing in on the truth. Yet the deeper they delved, the more twisted the case became. With emotions running high and the pressure mounting, the team prepared for the final chapter in uncovering who was truly responsible for Johnny Ray Baxter's brutal death. Detectives Mitchell, Kinsey, and Carter knew they were getting closer to the truth, but the case continued to twist and turn with each new revelation. On April 18, 2015, they called Lily back for a second round of questioning. This time she was visibly shaken, her nerves laid bare. When asked why she had been in the park near Beaver Lake on the night of Johnny Ray's murder, Lily claimed she went there to clear her mind, insisting she had no knowledge of the bloody shirt or gloves found nearby. Despite her insistence, the detectives pressed her, their questions cutting deeper. Why was she at the park, alone, so late? How could she not know about the items tied so clearly to the murder? But Lily held firm. Her story, though shaky, remained consistent. She didn't know how those items got there. Meanwhile, the forensic team continued their work, and it wasn't long before they made another critical discovery. Hair fibers found on the gloves matched none other than Darling Baxter's DNA. This new evidence thickened the plot considerably. Could mother and daughter both be involved in Johnny Ray's brutal death? With this discovery, the detectives brought Darling back for questioning on April 18, 2015. Darling walked into the station, calm, but noticeably more anxious than before. Presented with the new evidence, Darling admitted she recognized the gloves. They were hers. She had used them while gardening, but she had no explanation for how they ended up near Beaver Lake, stained with blood. The detectives knew they were onto something. The case, once murky and full of dead ends, was beginning to unravel. They were getting closer to solving Johnny Ray's murder, but there were still missing pieces in this tragic puzzle. The discovery of the blood-stained shirt and gloves, along with the hair fibers, pointed to something more complex than they initially thought. The involvement of both Darling and Lily seemed increasingly possible, but there were still gaps. While the focus had shifted heavily onto Johnny Ray's wife and stepdaughter, another suspect lingered in the background: Johnny Ray's ex-wife, Diddy Baxter. Diddy, now 46, was known for her fiery temper and her open disdain for Johnny Ray's new marriage to Darling. The relationship between Johnny Ray and Diddy had been fraught with tension, their divorce years ago leaving deep scars. Diddy, who lived locally and managed a grocery store, hadn't hidden her feelings about Johnny's remarriage, often referring to Darling as a homewrecker to anyone who would listen. On April 19, 2015, detectives Mitchell, Kinsey, and Carter brought Diddy in for questioning. From the start, Diddy was defiant. She had a reputation for speaking her mind, and that's exactly what she did. She openly admitted that her relationship with Johnny Ray had been rocky, marked by constant arguments. She made no secret of her hatred for Darling, blaming her for the end of her marriage. But despite the bitterness, Diddy vehemently denied any involvement in Johnny Ray's murder. When the detectives pressed her on her whereabouts the night of April 11th, Diddy claimed she had been home, alone, drinking wine and watching TV. Her alibi, a solitary night spent with Dancing with the Stars, had no witnesses, which made the detectives wary. A search of Diddy's home turned up a few items of interest, including a pair of gardening gloves similar to the ones found in the park. But forensic analysis yielded no DNA or blood on them, casting doubt on Diddy's involvement. However, Diddy's reaction to Johnny Ray's affair with Lily complicated things. She had recently discovered their secret relationship, and this revelation had stirred up fresh anger. Friends and co-workers reported that Diddy had been vocal in her outrage, calling Johnny Ray disgusting and a disgrace. Neighbors, too, reported hearing loud arguments and raised voices coming from Diddy's house in the days leading up to the murder. Despite her explosive temper and uncooperative nature during the interrogation, the detectives found no concrete evidence to tie Diddy directly to Johnny Ray's death. They knew they couldn't afford to rule her out entirely, but they needed more to move forward with any charges. Diddy remained a suspect, but the case against her was tenuous at best. Then on April 21, 2015, after nearly 2 weeks of investigation, a crucial breakthrough finally came. A surveillance camera from a nearby gas station revealed a critical piece of evidence: footage of Darling Baxter's blue Honda Civic driving toward Beaver Lake late on the night of the murder. Detectives Mitchell, Kinsey, and Carter pored over the footage. It was unmistakable. The car, caught on camera at around 11:30 p.m., April 11th, matched Darling's, directly contradicting her alibi. This new lead shifted the entire focus of the investigation. Darling had claimed she was in Little Rock with her sister, but the footage told a different story. This discovery raised the stakes. Darling had lied about her whereabouts, and now the detectives had solid proof that she was near the scene of the crime that night. But the question remained: was she working alone, or was Lily involved too? The possibility of a mother-daughter conspiracy loomed larger than ever. The detectives knew they were closing in on the truth. The case, filled with betrayal, lies, and hidden motives, was about to reach its climax. At the critical juncture, with the new evidence in hand, Detectives Mitchell, Kinsey, and Carter were confident they had uncovered the truth behind Johnny Ray's tragic murder. On the morning of April 22, 2015, they moved swiftly. The sun shone brightly over Fayetteville, and the local media, including KFSM and KWA, were already buzzing with the latest developments in the case. Darling Baxter, sitting in her office at Razorback Accounting, was completely unaware of the storm about to hit. The police entered her office calmly but with purpose. Darling, surprised but maintaining her composure, listened as they informed her that she was being arrested for the murder of her husband, Johnny Ray Baxter. As she was led out in handcuffs, surrounded by flashing cameras and reporters eager to capture every moment, she repeatedly claimed her innocence. However, the evidence against her was overwhelming. It was the affair between Johnny Ray and Lily that had driven Darling into a spiral of anger and despair. The betrayal she felt from both her husband and her daughter was too much to bear. The detectives believed that, on the night of the murder, Darling had confronted Johnny Ray in a heated argument. Tempers flared, emotions boiled over, and in a fit of uncontrollable rage, she grabbed the hammer and struck him multiple times, leaving him lifeless on the bedroom floor. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Neighbors and friends who had known Darling as a diligent, intelligent, and kind-hearted woman were stunned. Could this same woman be capable of such a violent and unthinkable act? Headlines in the Fayetteville Observer screamed of her arrest, and news segments on local stations delved into the grim details. Johnny Ray's family reacted with a mix of relief and heartbreak. On one hand, they were thankful that the killer had been found, but on the other, the revelation of betrayal within the family devastated them. Lily, in particular, was shattered. She had not only lost her stepfather, but was now watching her mother being taken away in handcuffs, all in the span of days. The emotional toll on her and the rest of the family was unimaginable. As Darling was transported to the police station, she remained adamant in her denial. But the evidence stacked against her, from the surveillance footage placing her near the crime scene to the forensic findings and her conflicting statements, painted an irrefutable picture of guilt. The community of Fayetteville grappled with the tragedy, a once tight-knit family now torn apart by betrayal and violence. Johnny Ray Baxter's murder exposed deep, hidden secrets, and while the police had solved the case, the emotional wounds it left behind would take far longer to heal. The trial of Darling Baxter for the murder of her husband began on July 15, 2015, at the Washington County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with journalists from KFSM, KNA, and other media outlets. Concerned community members, curious onlookers, and those who knew the Baxters filled the seats, eager to witness the legal battle unfold. District Attorney Robert Stevens, a seasoned and relentless prosecutor, led the case against Darling. At 45, Stevens was known for his sharp intellect and his ability to leave no stone unturned. He painted a chilling picture for the jury. Darling Baxter, overcome by the emotional pain of discovering the affair between Johnny Ray and Lily, reached a breaking point that led her to commit a heinous act of violence. He presented the surveillance footage of her car near Beaver Lake, the forensic evidence from the crime scene, and her inconsistent statements to the police. To Stevens, the motive was clear. Betrayal and anger drove her to murder. The defense, led by Michelle Williams, a calm and tactical 39-year-old attorney, fought back. Williams argued that Darling was innocent, emphasizing that the evidence presented was circumstantial at best. She suggested that someone else, driven by jealousy or resentment, could have been responsible for Johnny Ray's death. Williams questioned the reliability of the surveillance footage and pointed out the absence of any eyewitnesses, directly placing Darling at the scene of the crime. Throughout the trial, Johnny Ray's family sat in the front row, their faces etched with pain. They listened intently to every word, watching as the events leading to Johnny Ray's death were laid bare in the courtroom. Lily, torn between love for her mother and guilt over the affair, struggled to cope with the emotional weight of the proceedings. She had already lost her stepfather, and now her mother was on the verge of a life sentence. After 2 intense weeks of testimony, the jury was sent to deliberate. For 3 days, they combed through the evidence, weighing the arguments made by both sides. On August 3, 2015, the jury finally reached their decision. The courtroom was tense as the foreman read the verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. A collective sigh rippled through the room. Darling Baxter stood still, showing little emotion, while Johnny Ray's family erupted into tears. some of relief, others of sadness. The verdict was swiftly reported across local media, the culmination of months of investigation and courtroom drama. Judge Lisa Everly, who had presided over the case, sentenced Darling to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As she delivered the sentence, Judge Everly acknowledged the emotional depth of the case. The evidence, she said, clearly pointed to Darling's guilt, and the crime itself was rooted in deep personal betrayal and anger. She expressed sympathy for Johnny Ray's family, hoping the sentence would bring them some semblance of peace and closure. The reaction to the verdict was divided. Some felt that justice had been served, and Darling's punishment fit the crime. Others believed the sentence was too harsh, given the emotional and psychological pressure she had been under at the time. The affair, the unraveling family, the deceit, it all painted a complex portrait of a woman pushed to her limits. But in the end, it was clear. Johnny Ray Baxter's murder had shattered lives, and while the case was closed, the emotional scars would linger for years to come. Ray Baxter's family, though deeply scarred by the events, finally felt a sense of relief as justice had been served. The trial and sentencing had brought a close to the tragic chapter in the Baxter family's history, and the community of Fayetteville could begin to heal. Johnny Ray's death had left deep emotional wounds, but with Darling Baxter behind bars, there was now a path toward closure. For Darling, life became a monotonous routine within the walls of the Arkansas Department of Correction. Her days were structured, with limited visits from family and friends, and strict regulations governing her every action. The media frenzy that once surrounded the case had slowly faded away, replaced by other headlines and local news in Fayetteville. Life moved on, even in the wake of such a profound tragedy. Lily Adams, now 19 and continuing her studies in psychology at the University of Arkansas, struggled to rebuild her life. The weight of guilt and grief from her role in the affair and the impact it had on her family was heavy, but she sought solace through counseling. It became her lifeline, helping her navigate the emotional wreckage left behind by the death of her stepfather. She distanced herself from the public eye, focusing on her education and channeling her energy into volunteer work at local animal shelters, finding comfort in caring for those unable to speak for themselves. Meanwhile, Detective Sarah Mitchell Kinsey, who had been instrumental in solving Johnny Ray's murder, received recognition for her exemplary work on the case. She continued her role within the Fayetteville Police Department, applying her skills to other complex investigations and mentoring new detectives. Her partner, Detective James Carter, opted for a new challenge and transferred to the Northwest Arkansas Drug Task Force. There, he dedicated his efforts to tackling the region's rising drug-related crimes, his experience in high-profile cases proving invaluable. Though Fayetteville began to regain a sense of normalcy, the community still felt the echoes of Johnny Ray Baxter's murder. His friends and neighbors remembered him as the real estate agent with a contagious smile and a love for sailing. In a touching tribute, the local Rotary Club held a memorial service in Johnny Ray's honor, and a commemorative plaque was installed at the Fayetteville Town Center. It was a small yet meaningful way to remember his contributions to the community he had loved so much. Diddy Baxter, Johnny Ray's first wife, found her own path to healing. Leaning on the support of family and friends, she focused on her career at Hart's Food Stores and began participating in local charity events, including the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure in Bentonville. She channeled her pain into purpose, determined to keep her family close and honor the memory of the man they had lost. Her grandchildren, who had adored Johnny Ray, missed him dearly, and Diddy made sure they felt loved and supported through the difficult months that followed. As time passed, the once fresh scars of Johnny Ray's murder began to heal. Though the memory of the tragedy would always be a part of Fayetteville's history, the town rallied around the Baxter family. Together, they moved forward, supporting each other through shared grief and a collective resolve to find peace. Johnny Ray Baxter's story, marked by love, betrayal, and murder, stands as a somber reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the dire consequences when emotions spiral out of control. His death shook a family, a community, and a town, but in the end, it also brought them closer together. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through another episode of True Crime Sketches Files. As always, we strive to uncover the darkest corners of the human psyche and share these stories with you. Stay tuned for more gripping tales, and until next time, stay safe.